still think we ought to take the rights off now.
I think
To let brown people get
about
along.
about 200,000 people.
Well, no, I'd rather use a nuclear bomb if you got that ready.
And that, I think, would just be too much.
The nuclear bomb? Is that what I'll do? I just want you to think big, Henry, for Christ's sake.
You got us in this mess because you don't know where the hell you going, do you? Son of a bitch, you got! Someday this war's gonna end.
I would like to thank those who have supported my channel by watching, subscribing, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate your support and welcome you to part 1 of my 2-part film analysis of Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 war epic Apocalypse Now Redux, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and co-written by Coppola and John Milius. The film stars Marlon Brando as Colonel Walter E. Kurtz, Robert Duvall as Lieutenant Colonel William Bill Kilgore,
Charlie, don't surf!
Martin Sheen as U.S. Army Captain Benjamin Willard, Frederic Forrest as Engineman 3rd Class J. Chef Hicks, Albert Hall as Chief Petty Officer George Phillips, Sam Bottoms as Gunner's Mate 3rd Class Lance B. Johnson, Laurence Fishburne as Gunner's Mate 3rd Class Tyrone Mr. Clean Miller, Dennis Hopper as an American photojournalist, Harrison Ford as Colonel G. Lucas, and G.D. Spradlin as Lieutenant General R. Corman. Apocalypse Now Redux is loosely based on Joseph Conrad's 1899 novella Heart of Darkness. Whereas Conrad's novella is set in the Congo, Apocalypse Now Redux is set in the Vietnam War. If you like this breakdown of Apocalypse Now Redux, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the Godfather of Cinema, movie reviews and more. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit the bell so that you won't miss any new videos that I'll upload in the future. Apocalypse Now Redux begins in Saigon in a hotel room inside of Captain Willard's head. It has been a week since his last mission, and although he could have remained home with his wife in America after completing his first tour, he detests lies, conflict, and confusion, as the only thing he thought about when he was with her was getting back into the jungle where he belonged. The jungle is savage and primitive, but at least there is no lying, conflict, or confusion in the jungle. It is either death or victory, but not both. Captain Willard wants a mission, and for his sins he receives one, his last mission, in a briefing room in Nha Trang from a general, a soldier, and a civilian who want to send him up the Nung River in a boat to a Cambodian jungle and there execute with extreme prejudice ex-Colonel Walter E. Kurtz for murdering 4 agents. According to General Corman, Kurtz was once a good man, liberal thinker, and humanitarian of wit and humor before they lost contact with him. They play a taped radio transmission of Kurtz accusing his superiors of being lying hypocrites.
The stench of lies.
And this really puts the hook in Willard as to what could make a good man, liberal thinker, and humanitarian of wit and humor like Walter E. Kurtz turn his back on civilization, break off contact with his commanders, and fight the enemy his way instead of theirs. And it doesn't take Willard long to see the lies and hypocrisy for himself in Nha Trang's decision to commission him, a murderer like Kurtz, to murder Colonel Walter E. Kurtz when charging a man with murder in a war zone like Vietnam was as senseless as a traffic cop handing out speeding tickets at the Indy 500. More lies and hypocrisy slap Willard in the face when he is taken to a coastal village to have air cab the 1st of the 9th to escort him to the mouth of the Nung River. Here, Willard sees an American chaplain giving dead VC soldiers Holy Communion. A senseless act in a scene that segues into another senseless act in the scene in which Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore offers a canteen of water to a dying VC soldier.
Lance Johnson, the surfer.
And there are even more lies and hypocrisy on the Now River. In one instance, Chief Petty Officer George Phillips, or Chief, the captain of the boat taking him to Kurtz's jungle stronghold in Cambodia, stops a sampling boat.
I'm gonna take a look.
And shoots up the entire family on it because of a girl reaching for her puppy. Afterwards, a dispute breaks out between Chief and Willard. Chief wants to bring the wounded girl aboard his boat and take her to a medic.
Bring her on board.
However, Willard disagrees with Chief.
What are you talking about?
And shoots the girl to put her out of her misery. He told Chief not to bother the sampling boat to begin with, and if he didn't want to get all the way off their own boat, meaning to kill everyone on the sampling boat, including the girl, he never should have bothered the sampling boat at all.
Unless you were going all the way.
In his voiceover, Willard acknowledges the lies and hypocrisy in Kurtz's dossier. Chief had a family killed and thought that giving them a band-aid would fix everything. Well, it wouldn't. As the photojournalist says later in the film, you can't love someone and hate them at the same time. Or can you? Is it possible to love and hate someone at the same time? Or can a person be capable of either love or hate exclusively, but not love and hate simultaneously? Or can a person only be capable of good or evil, but not good and evil? On top of all the lies and hypocrisy that caused the rift between Kurtz and his commanders at Nha Trang, there is as much confusion on the Now River about whether there is even a war at all. For instance, at the staging area where Willard meets up with Lieutenant Kilgore and her cab, soldiers are greeted right out of the chopper by a camera crew and a film director telling them to look away from the cameras and to act like they are fighting.
Damn it, just go by like you're fighting.
Then there is Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore ordering his soldiers to surf the beach of an LZ under heavy enemy fire. One of his soldiers is scared shitless.
Still pretty hairy out there, sir.
And hesitates until Kilgore gives him an ultimatum to either surf or fight. And naturally, the soldier who by definition should choose to fight, chooses to surf instead. In both of these instances, the soldiers being told by the movie director to act and the soldiers in the scene being ordered to surf. We see soldiers that are confused about what and where they are, as Kurtz was once confused about the offsetting roles he once served as a humanitarian and as a soldier in the U.S. Special Forces. However, since getting, quote, off the boat, unquote, and giving himself up to the lowest, most primitive level of human nature in the Cambodian jungle as a god among the natives, there is no longer any confusion on the parts of Kurtz and Willard, nor the NBA regulars or VCs on their roles in the Vietnam War. For as Willard says in his voiceover in that Saigon hotel room awaiting his last mission, he would rather be in the jungles of Nam than home in America with his wife. In fact, he loves the jungle so much that he divorces his wife, unlike the other soldiers of his group on the PBR who would rather be back home surfing or taking trips to Disneyland. They have not broken off with the old world nor their old selves, as he had broken off from his wife and as Kurtz had broken off contact with ComSec intelligence commanders in Nha Trang. For them, as well as their enemies, the NBA regulars and VCs, there are only two ways home: victory or death. As for being a committed soldier, the same cannot be said of Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore of Air Cav, the 1st of the 9th.
Charlie, don't surf!
and throwing a barbecue party for his men at an LZ, chopping in T-bones and beer in order to make those soldiers feel like they are still at home. However, as Willard says in his voiceover, Kilgore's sentimental gesture confuses his soldiers by dividing their hearts between home and the war front.
Paralyzed force.
This is also the conflict between good and evil that General Corman speaks of in Nha Trang, or the state of being divided between two worlds. Then there's the confused state of Gunner's Mate 3rd Class Lance B. Johnson manning the forward 50s on the PBR. He gets a letter from his little brother Jim telling him about his recent trip to Disneyland. As confused as everything else is on the Nung River so far, from soldiers surfing the beach of an LZ under heavy enemy fire to making love to a Playboy centerfold at the depot at How Fat. Having experienced all of this in a so-called war zone along the Nung River, Lance can no longer distinguish Vietnam from Disneyland.
It's here, really is here.
And speaking of Lance's inability to divorce himself from his old life in the world by embracing his new life as a soldier in the Vietnam War, Chef reads a letter from his girlfriend about how she can't picture him in Vietnam away from her and how he should be at home with her on their couch watching television and drinking beer. As if he is not distracted enough by his girlfriend's letter, Chef gets off the boat to venture into the jungle for some mangoes. Although safer in the boat than in the jungle, Chef was a saucier chef back in New Orleans.
I'm a saucier.
Before signing up with the Navy to fight in the war. But Chef ends up finding more than a mango when a tiger leaps out of the jungle to eat him. He and Willard barely make it back to the boat. Like Colonel Kilgore, the soldiers at the How Fat outpost clamoring over Playboy bunnies and Lance and confusing Vietnam with Disneyland. Chef's longing for the cuisine he enjoyed at home causes him to forget that he is not a saucier chef in New Orleans, but a soldier in a war zone in Vietnam, surrounded by enemies that want to eat him like the tiger almost does. As Willard says in his voiceover, never get out of the boat unless you were going all the way.
You're goddamn right.
Kurtz got off the boat and split from the whole program. Unlike Kurtz and Willard, Chef is still on the boat and half committed, with 1 foot at home and 1 foot in the war. In fact, Chef even says in this scene prior to almost being eaten by the tiger that he wasn't in Vietnam at all, but with the famous movie star Raquel Welch. Chef's statement stands in contrast to Willard in Saigon saying that when he was home, he wanted to be in the jungle. In July 1961, Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted experiments on the ways in which authority figures affected people's behavior. Milgram selected a diverse pool of volunteers, from postal clerks to high school teachers, and had them to take turns playing teacher and student in a memory test wherein each time a student gave a wrong answer, Milgram would order the teacher to punish that student with electric shocks ranging from 45 to 450 volts. Milgram withheld from the teachers the fact that the student on the receiving end of the experiment was his assistant, and that the electric shocks only went up to 45 volts. At 150 volts, the learner or student would cry out and demand to be released from the shock plate. 40% of the teachers giving the shocks would comply with the student. However, 30% of the teachers would not comply with the student no matter how he cried out. One of the volunteer teachers in the experiment later said that if it were up to him and not Milgram giving him the order, he would have stopped shocking the student. In addition to a colonel ordering his soldiers to serve under enemy fire and commanders at Nha Trang enlisting a murderer to execute another man for committing murder, there is the Do Lung Bridge. The generals who are not there
Who's the commanding officer here?
senselessly order soldiers who are there
Ain't you?
to keep rebuilding the bridge each time that the enemy blows it up, just so that the generals can claim that the road is technically open when it isn't. Equally senseless as rebuilding a bridge that you cannot cross is ordering soldiers like Kurtz to inoculate children against polio in a small village only to have the enemy, who is focused on winning at any cost, to go into the village and hack off the arms of these same children. In Apocalypse Now Redux, the Nung River is the moral war and the conflict between good and evil in the soul of man, as Kurtz explains to Willard in saying that in order to free oneself from the Nung River and the moral conflict between what is and what isn't, between good and evil in the heart, you must utilize men's primordial instincts in order to get them to kill without the moral judgments that will make them see their actions as either good or evil. The side that could condition its soldiers to act inhumanely will win the war and free the soul of man. On the other hand, the side that held on to moral judgments and acted humanely will lose the war by forever enslaving the soul of man to conflict. Thanks for watching my film analysis of Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 Vietnam War epic Apocalypse Now Redux, and be sure to hit the bell to be notified of part 2 of my analysis of this film that I'll be dropping very, very soon. Until next time.